I know that, having been involved with the media for so long, that I am perceived to be an establishment face. Sorry, that was the word you've got. Hit me again? But where I belong, I don't know. I really don't. By the time television came along, BBC News on radio was already a long... Despite being born in Britain, I am still asked, yes, but where are you from? And I cannot truthfully give a definitive answer.
Superb. Why were you happy? We were very happy.
Ecstatic?
Thanks very much.
I am a true mongrel, and I'm proud of it.
Moira Stuart was born and raised in Britain and has been a household name for over 20 years. But she's not the first in her family to make an impact here.
I come from a long line of outsiders, and I think what's fascinating about my family is that for generations they've been coming over to Britain. We have been invading this joint for a long time.
The popular perception is that black immigration to Britain began in the 1950s, when thousands of Caribbean migrants came to the UK in search of work. But Moira's ancestors tell a different story.
I'd be fascinated to know what they found when they came to Britain, whether the reaction was hostile, whether it was welcoming exotic strangers, whether they were ignored. I have no idea.
Moira's mother, Marjorie, came from Dominica. Her father, Harold, from Barbados. They met in London in the early 1940s and married in 1943, but the marriage didn't last.
I have no emotional ties with my late father. He and my mother divorced when I was 10 months old. I really have no real impression of him, but my mother is my inspiration. That's why I'm looking for my ancestors through the maternal line.
Moira's off to see her mother, who now lives in Canada.
You're going to get some water? Right there.
Marjorie was brought up in a wealthy middle-class household. In 1935, she was sent to Britain aboard the Berengaria. Aged 14, she was about to embark on a new life at an English boarding school.
Thank you, my love. Thank you. Mummy, why did you go to Britain?
My parents wanted us to go to Catholic school in Britain, to a convent, and that's where we went.
Were people in Britain friendly? What was their reaction to you?
They looked at us as curiosities because we spoke differently, and we were from another part of the world that they didn't know about, but they were quite friendly.
When war broke out in 1939, Marjorie was training as a nurse. She was one of 10,000 black Britons living and working in London during the war.
So would you say it's true there was a wartime spirit? We were all in this together.
Oh yes. It brought a lot of closeness to people. And the bomb didn't say just for blacks only, or for whites only. So it was to get everybody. So we all had to be nice together.
At some point, you meet and marry my father, Harold Stuart, but things begin to fall apart?
Well, we were both accustomed to very, very high living. We're accustomed to having servants. That's our background. And then to find yourself in a situation where things are rationed and the stresses of making a living and trying to get through made it difficult. And that's when we broke up.
Marjorie's childhood journey to Britain was almost the same as the journey her own mother made more than 20 years earlier. Marjorie's mother, Clara, Moira's grandmother, was born in 1893 in Dominica.
Now, this is your mother. She was very much the Victorian lady.
Yes, she was, very strict.
Why had she left Dominica as a girl?
She wanted to sing, so her father sent her to a conservatory and had her voice trained. And when she'd finished that, he said, now, I'd like you to do something practical. This is what you love. Now I'd like you to go and do something practical. And he sent her to Edinburgh to do medicine.
In 1915, Clara arrived in Edinburgh to begin her medical studies. Whilst there, she met Moira's grandfather, Edgar Gordon, a fellow student who came from Trinidad. Moira's now heading for Edinburgh to find out what student life was like for Edgar and Clara. They were amongst the privileged few from the Caribbean who could afford a university education.
I never met my grandfather. I did meet my grandmother, very briefly, as a child, not long before she died. And she was very, very sweet and warm and refined is the strongest impression. Very kind, but remote, which is strange to be warm and remote at the same time, but that was the impression I got. This picture of the students at Edinburgh, taken in 1915, begs more questions than it answers. They're all so wonderfully suited and booted and seem extraordinarily comfortable in their attire, which speaks to me of a certain, for want of a better expression, class, income group. I don't know whether my grandfather and grandmother had met at this point. This is before they even married, though, and she looks pretty remote to me. Gorgeously elegant, but rather distant. All of the group are African Caribbean. I'm wondering whether Edinburgh was dealing with apartheid, a separate education system, and whether these were among the very first African Caribbean students in Edinburgh.
On the university campus, Moira discovers evidence of black student life in Edinburgh long before her grandparents' days.
I've heard that there is a plaque here, which apparently I should see. And my good gracious, I think it must be this one. James Africanus Horton of Sierra Leone, 1835 to 1883. First African graduate of the university. Sir, how wonderful. I'm astounded because I thought that my very precious photograph of my grandparents denoted, if not the first, well then among the first. But this is magnificent. I'm absolutely honoured to see this. I'm really, really chuffed.
Edinburgh was at the heart of a British liberal movement dating back to the mid-1700s. The city was home to several prominent intellectuals who were key figures in the anti-slavery campaign. And as slavery was abolished in the mid-19th century, the university emerged as a haven for black students from Africa and the Commonwealth. By the time Edgar and Clara enrolled in 1915, they were part of an established tradition. To get a picture of what student life was like for her grandparents, Moira is going to meet Professor Jeff Palmer, Edinburgh resident for over 30 years and a former student at the university.
And this is one of the only pictures of my grandparents. Can you throw any light on why all of these students should be together?
I wouldn't have thought there's an apartheid system. I think this to me looks like a photograph taken of a university society, or could be taken at an annual church service or something of the kind.
I think. So would the rest of the students have accepted these somewhat exotic folk?
Well, I knew a doctor, and he graduated about a similar time as your grandparents. And his view was that the Scottish people were very friendly, but then they were probably friendly because they knew they were leaving. These are people who were seen as studying here and would return home to their countries. So black students were accepted and treated very well.
Mm-hmm. Is it extraordinary that she is the lone woman in this group? Do you know whether she was one of the very first women of Caribbean origin to be at Edinburgh?
I would suspect that if she is not the first, she'd be pretty near to be the first. Mm-hmm. I was very surprised to see her sitting there because when I was a student in the 60s, we didn't have many female medical students from the Caribbean mm-hmm. or from Africa. Mm-hmm. And I think that she's some sort of a pioneer.
This is absolutely extraordinary.
For more detail about Edgar and Clara's academic life, the best place to look is the University Library.
You're wonderful. Many thanks. Love it.
It holds the exam results for every student since the mid-18th century.
This is Edgar, my grandfather's student records for medicine and surgery. A name, Edgar Fitzgerald Gordon, birthplace Port of Spain, Trinidad. He studied physics, chemistry, practical chemistry, zoology, practical zoology, botany. Well, he passed in all of this. Good lad. What a brilliant lad. See what Granny was doing. This is degrees in medicine and surgery for Clara Christian, address Roseau, Dominica, and she was 22. Oh, she was a little older than he, I believe, and she took physics, chemistry, practical zoology, practical zoology, and passed in each and every one. How interesting. But she never completed her studies. She stepped down, and he graduated, and she didn't. They call it love.
The records confirm a family legend that Edgar persuaded Clara to give up her studies in order to start a family. A common experience for female undergraduates at that time. Edgar and Clara married in 1917. A year later, they had their first daughter, Barbara, and twins Joyce and Evelyn followed 2 years after that. Moira has just collected their birth certificates.
Well, in here are the birth certificates of Edgar and Clara's first 3 daughters, all born in Scotland. Just got them from the Scottish Records Office. I've never seen them. And they are for Barbara Aurelia Gordon, born in 1917 in Edinburgh. Then 1920, January the 23rd, the 2 twins, Joyce Eugenie Gordon, and second one is Mater Evelyn Gordon at Birchfield, Kingussie. I don't know that address at all, but it says here, by this point, Edgar Fitzgerald Gordon is a physician. I did know that my grandfather was in practice in Scotland. I thought it was in Edinburgh before they left the country, but I didn't know it was... I'd never heard of Kingussie. That is amazing. Wherever that is.
Unlike many of his fellow overseas graduates, Edgar chose not to head straight home to the Caribbean. Instead, he took his young family further north, into the Highlands.
Well, I'm off to Kingussie, in the footsteps of Clara and Edgar, to see what Kingussie is all about. I'm ashamed to say I've never even heard of Kingussie before. I gather it's up in the Highlands, and it's pretty remote, which, and I would have thought it would have been even more out of the way for them then, in 1918 by then. I'd love to get a sense of how they were received, how the locals would have taken to, or not, the new doctor in town from Trinidad.
Kingussie is a small town in the Cairngorm Mountains, 200 miles north of Edinburgh. By 1918, the town's male population had been decimated by World War I. It's probable that Edgar travelled here in response to a shortage of local doctors. But all Moira has to go on from the birth certificates is their grandparents' address.
Well, we're a heck of a long way from Dominica, Trinidad. Lovely weather. Looking for Clara and Edgar's original home, Birchfield, and I'm told it's been renamed, a Gaelic name, Callanashir. It's so pretty. Wow. I think this is it. I don't see a house name. Oh! It is gorgeous. It's big. Wow. I can see them. I can imagine them. Edgar and Clara, with little Barbara, who would have been about 2 when the twins were born, Evelyn and Joyce. It is exquisite. I didn't expect it to look like this. I expected something very humble, actually, but this is gorgeous. I hope it was warmer than it is now. It's freezing. But it is wonderful.
Moira's keen to know where a newly qualified doctor would find work in this remote Highland town.
Found out some more information, heading for what was the only surgery in town, and it's now a guest house. And I'm hoping to meet the proprietor, Pete Sleaford.
Hello.
Pete Sleaford?
Well, pleased to meet you.
There, Moira Stuart. Hello.
Lovely to see you.
I gather that this was once a doctor's surgery.
It was, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it true that this was the one and only surgery in the town?
So I understand the last doctor, I'm informed, used to practice here was a Dr. Orchard.
Uh-huh.
Since then, they've opened a new practice in the village, but I've got contact details of his daughter, if you would like that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Please come in.
You're a good man. Thank you.
The former surgery was handed down through 3 generations of the Orchard family. They each practiced here as the town doctor.
Hello, Margaret, I'm here.
Oh, hello there. It's Moira Stuart calling you from your father's old general practice in Kinusi. And I'm calling you... and I'm calling you to find out whether you can help me in tracing my late grandfather, Edgar Gordon.
Yes, I'll certainly do my best.
He was living in Kinusi in 1918. Could he possibly have been in practice with your grandfather?
No, actually, I don't think so. I know that certainly he was a single-handed practitioner, but it was actually a sort of a private hospital. It was called a sanatorium in Kinusi. So it is possible that your grandfather maybe worked there. So that could be a lead.
That is a magnificent lead, Margaret Ann. Thank you. I
That
am
might be
really,
helpful.
really grateful.
And it was very nice to talk to you.
And to you, my
good
love.
luck.
Right.
Okay then. Cheerio
Bye-bye.
then. Bye-bye.
Having ruled out the surgery, the only other place where Edgar could have practiced medicine is the former sanatorium, now a home for the elderly. Kinusi's clean air earned it the nickname Switzerland of the British Isles. The sanatorium was one of the most sought-after centres for the treatment of tuberculosis.
Hello there. Speak to
Sister Clark. She's in here.
Hello, Sister Clark.
Yes.
Hello there.
How do you
I'm
do?
Moira Stuart.
How
Hello
do you
there.
do?
Apparently, my grandfather was in practice in the sanatorium from around 1918. Can you give me a taste of what it was like at that time?
And I think your grandfather must have worked with Dr. Savvy. He was a Swiss gentleman. And they looked after people with tuberculosis here. They thought that the Highland air was a cure for tuberculosis in those days. And they used to sleep outside in the snow. Their beds were taken outside to get the benefit of the Highland air. And they used to sleep outside in the snow.
In the early 20th century, tuberculosis, or TB as it was known, killed tens of thousands of people a year. The then renowned fresh air cure was believed to offer the best means of recovery.
And would this have been where they slept out in the snow?
Yes, all these windows, they were all doors, and they laid out onto the patios here, and they slept out. Some of them slept under the veranda, but
Those were the lucky ones.
their feet were pointing out into the snow.
Indeed.
Sometimes down in town it's not snowing, and it can be snowing up here, and it's not all that far away.
Gosh, it is wonderful air.
Yes, it's lovely.
No further traces of Edgar and Clara survive in Kinusi. Moira has traced their lives in Scotland as far back as she can.
It is an extraordinary place for Edgar and Clara to have come. Edinburgh was a long way from the Caribbean, but the Cairngorms, I mean, this is remote. It must have seemed so alien to them. It's so cold. Edgar must have really needed a job.
Edgar and Clara's fourth daughter was Moira's mother Marjorie. We know from her birth certificate that she was born in the Caribbean in 1921, which means the family spent just 3 years in Kinusi's clean, cold air. Although Edgar and Clara were pioneers, they were not the first of Moira's family to cross the Atlantic. Clara's father, Moira's great-grandfather, George James Christian, came to Britain at the end of the 19th century. In 1899, George arrived in London to study law. London was then a confident, bustling city, capital of the British Empire. Margaret Busby, Moira's second cousin, is also descended from George Christian. She's currently researching a book about his life.
Margaret, what do you know about my great-grandfather, George James Christian?
Okay, he grew up in Dominica, and he came from a sort of humble background. He was a teacher, but he was moonlighting in the evenings, wrapping limes in order to save up money because he wanted to come to Britain and study law. So he had to travel cargo class apparently because he couldn't afford passenger class. And he came over here in 1899, enrolled at Gray's Inn, did what should have been a 3-year course in 18 months, I gather.
Amazing.
This is George James Christian as a young man.
Looks wonderful.
Must have been about the time he was called to the bar in 1902.
It is quite extraordinary because I had this picture of him as a little boy. My mother had said that they were so poor that he would walk for over a mile barefoot to school every day. And this same child eventually, and with Victoria on the throne, is attending Gray's Inn.
Despite George's humble origins, the Gray's Inn records for 1902 show that he was mixing with the sons of British aristocrats and high flyers from around the Commonwealth. George and his friends embraced the best of London life.
He had a very good friend who was also a barrister, a Sierra Leone barrister called Franz Dubb, and they loved to lunch in the fanciest restaurants, the Frascati's, and they'd order champagne and give the waiters huge tips. It must have been quite sort of disconcerting for the waiters to have these sort of 2 grand black men sort of tipping heavily and ordering champagne. Clearly wasn't the norm at that time. But he was also very much in tune with the plight of black people throughout the world. In fact, he got involved with the first Pan-African Conference, which was held in London in July 1900. There were many delegates from various parts of the British Empire, and they were discussing the position of black people in various parts of the world.
In 1900, Britain owned colonies stretching across Africa, Asia and the Caribbean. In that year, the first Pan-African Congress took place in London. Its aim was to examine the destructive effects of colonialism. George Christian was at the heart of proceedings.
George James Christian made one of the most applauded speeches, which was clearly much reported. It's reported here in the Times, where he talks about the treatment of black people wherever they were.
The slave trade still continues to affect the political and civil progress of Africa. As the black man was stolen from his country, so now is his country being stolen from him, and the plunder of Africa continues.
Delegates to the first Pan-African Congress stayed here, at the St. Ermines Hotel in Westminster, just around the corner from the Houses of Parliament.
What an establishment, and it is at the heart of the establishment. And it is amazing that in 1900, when all of the delegates from across Africa, from America, from across the Caribbean, gathered right here in the reign of Victoria to talk about the injustices, the appalling state of black people everywhere. And my great-grandfather, George James, was right here. He was definitely a mover and a shaker for the good of those around him. On the other hand, he certainly seemed to enjoy the finer things in life. I think he felt he deserved, he had earned the right to be comfortable.
After completing his studies, George Christian travelled to the Gold Coast in West Africa, where he made a name for himself as a lawyer and politician. His achievements were remarkable by any standard, but coming from such humble origins on the Caribbean island of Dominica, his rise to prominence was spectacular. Moira's on her way to Dominica to find out more about George's background.
I know this extraordinary man, George James Christian, was my great-grandfather, but I'm hoping that I can get a handle on who the man actually was. He's achieved extraordinary things, but I don't know where he came from as a man.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dominica. We have just landed. You have yourselves a pleasant day and thank you for choosing the services of the Caribbean airline. All in transit passengers to Barbados, please remain on board. This service will continue in approximately 10 minutes. It is for your further safety to remain in your seats.
Dominica hasn't changed much since the late 1800s. It's always been one of the least developed Caribbean islands. As a child, George was poor but educated. He went on to become a teacher with the ambition to travel to Britain. As this was impossible on his meagre salary, George took on extra work to fulfill his dream.
I'm beginning to get an inkling of who the boy was, who George James was growing up. To go across the Atlantic into the unknown, into the cold unknown. And at that time, I would have thought it would have been a very forbidding nation, Britain, to try to approach and to find a place for oneself in, I think is quite extraordinary.
Intrigued by her great-grandfather's desire to leave his home in Dominica, Moira is visiting her Dominican cousins, Pearl and Purcell Christian, to find some answers. She's met Pearl Christian once before.
Hello, how are you doing? Hey, oh my God, it's good to see you. You look as beautiful as ever. Look at you, oh my God. How you are beautiful. It's so good to see you. It's great to see you. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Amazing.
Absolutely. That was in 2000.
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't realize that you were based in Dominica.
Yes.
Wow.
Actually, I'm the only one from that part of the family based in Dominica.
Yes.
From those who came up, you know. Of the four sisters.
And this God.
And this is... this is Purcell.
Wonderful to meet you.
The Christian family run Dominica's largest and most successful music school.
And what do you teach?
Well, we teach many different instruments here. Guitar, recorder, flute, piano.
And you sing?
Actually, my passion is working with young people, and I've done some musicals for kids. Yes. So that sort of thing really inspires me.
Gosh.
There was a tradition of Christians being musicians, and I remember my dad saying, you know, one of my daughters must be a musician. She has to be. So I feel like I'm a product of his own dreams, you know, sort of.
But it's amazing because I know that my grandmother, Clara, Christian as she was born, would not only sing for herself but used to give recitals and be involved in concerts. But music, I didn't realise was part and parcel of the family soul, you know. That is amazing. So I've got no excuse. Mind you, I dance, but hey, you know.
Moira hopes Pearl and Purcell can tell her something about her great-grandfather, George Christian's origins.
Do you know anything about the Christians in Dominica back in the 1850s?
Actually, the Christian family all originated in Antigua. Your great-grandfather was born in Dominica, but his father was born in Antigua. So there is the Antigua connection, you know, it's all originated in
George
Antigua.
James, my great-grandfather, his father was the one who was born in Antigua. Right. I see.
To understand George Christian's achievements, Moira needs to go back a further generation to another George Christian, her great-great-grandfather. George Sr. was originally from the island of Antigua. He came to work in the comparative wilderness of Dominica sometime in the mid-1800s.
Actually, your great-great-grandfather, when he came to Dominica, he was a teacher and did a lot of work in the communities.
I see. Yes. That is amazing.
And I think
over and over, the more I find out, the more education is the theme that seems to run through. It is quite extraordinary. Yes. It seems that that is what led George James Christian eventually to Britain.
It seems that George Jr. benefited from his father's passion for education. But there's a mystery. Why did George Sr. leave the relatively rich island of Antigua for the poverty of Dominica? Despite its lush appearance, Dominica's steep volcanic slopes and dense rainforest make farming difficult.
I think life here, seemingly, is not very, very easy. It's the terrain itself is a challenge. The sheer steep mountainsides, how on earth one could have plantations here and actually cultivate them, I have no idea. And even the goats have, I would have thought, difficulty in clinging onto the side. Wings are definitely a help here.
In the mid-19th century, George Christian Sr. arrived on an island with little more than a few fishing villages. So Moira is going to meet historian Lennox Honeychurch to try and work out why George Sr. came here.
Hello there.
Hello there.
And welcome to
Lovely
Dominica.
to meet you.
Good,
Lennox
good.
Honeychurch.
That's right.
Lovely. Lovely to see you at last.
And welcome back home in a kind of a way.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. So what we're going to do is get on here and go down the coast.
Oh, okay.
And you'll be able to see a lovely spread of the island as we go down towards the south.
Now, my great-great-grandfather, the first George James Christian, would he have been a runaway slave? Would he have, is that why he would be here?
Yeah. No, by that time slavery was over. He would have arrived in Dominica after emancipation, after the freeing of the slaves in the 1830s.
So if it was so difficult, why on earth would people come to Dominica?
Well, you see what happens in a place like Antigua, all the land was owned by plantations. Post-emancipation, the whites really controlled things still, and there was very little room for the former slaves to build a new life for themselves. They were almost forced to work on the former plantations, even if for money rather than in slavery. But when people like your ancestors came to Dominica, there was lots of this land, little holdings and lots available, and so they were then able to have an added freedom of being able to be landholders.
I get you. I've got now. So I understand the impulse, the impetus, the reasons for the movement.
What is remarkable about Moira's great-great-grandfather is that he managed to qualify as a teacher and leave Antigua just a few years after slavery ended in 1834. Moira is following the trail back to Antigua, 100 miles north of Dominica. In the mid-19th century, when George Christian Sr. lived here, Antiguan society was sharply divided between plantation owners and their former slaves, who by then made up 95% of the island's population. Not much had changed for the freed slaves, who had little or no choice but to keep working for their old masters.
Here you go, baby. Very much. God bless you. Nice doing business with you.
Moira wants to find out how her great-great-grandfather escaped the fate of almost all former slaves. She's meeting Reg Murphy, an expert on Antiguan history.
Reg Murphy, I presume. Lovely to meet you. Hello,
meet you.
I'm Moira.
Welcome to Antigua.
Thank you so much.
Moira hopes Reg can help to explain George Sr.'s rapid social advance. According to Moira's cousins, Pearl and Purcell, George Christian Sr. came from Green Bay, now a busy town near Antigua's capital, St. John's.
So we're approaching Green Bay now?
We're right at the outskirts of Green Bay. All of this area here is essentially a suburb for the poorer people who live and work in St. John's. Mm-hmm. After emancipation, by about 1850, people who came to try to get away from the plantations, particularly those with skills, would have come to this area. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the name of that street right there,
my good gracious!
You can see that the name Christian is very prominent in this area today. So this is your street, lady. Once upon a time,
Christian Street. Wow.
There are a lot of Christians in this area. Green Bay community, the sort of more elite people, the politicians, are all Christians, going back for several generations. The candidate in this area, her name is Gail Christian.
Today?
Yes, today. And if you look there...
No! You see, you can tell by the eyes. We've got the eyes. Wow! Good old Gail. Good luck, Gail.
She didn't win.
Oh.
Wrong party.
In the back streets of Green Bay is an important clue to how Moira's great-great-grandfather managed to get an education.
I think your ancestor would have been educated down here by the Moravians. We're going to go and take a look at the Moravian areas with the Moravian missionaries.
The Protestant Moravian mission began in Central Europe in the 1720s. Moravian missionaries were the first to try to educate black slaves in the Caribbean. And after abolition, the Moravians worked hard to improve the lives of the freed slaves.
Green Bay Moravian Church. Wow.
Green Bay Moravian Church. Now, this is where the Moravian settlements were. Now, the Moravians were very strict. They were known to be sort of disciplinarians. I call them the have-no-fun people. Mm-hmm. They weren't. They sort of frowned on any sort of activities like drinking, dancing, and these are the social activities that, for the African peoples, were part of their daily life. Mm-hmm. They enjoyed having to get away from their sort of hardship. They enjoy having a good dance and the drumming and the drinking that goes along with it. Mm-hmm. But along comes this religious order: have no fun, suffer quietly, be patient. Your reward will be coming soon.
That's a tough choice. I mean, either stay ignorant or become really, really boring. But very, very educated.
Don't say too loud. You're quite close to the church.
Oh, sorry.
But they've totally changed today. Totally different policies today. Mm-hmm. So your ancestor, being an educated person, was most likely would have been educated by the Moravians.
Yes. He would probably have come along, poor sod, barefoot and hoping that maybe life would get a bit better.
Whatever education George Christian had, in those days it was extremely unusual for a black Antiguan to be able to teach and travel. Could George's family background offer an explanation? It's not clear whether George was born into slavery, but his parents would certainly have been slaves. Antigua's National Archives hold the registers of slaves owned by plantation masters in the early 1800s.
I've come here specifically to find any ancestors, any relatives of my great-great-grandfather, George James Christian Sr. But there are some problems. The slave register gives, yes, the first names of so many men and women and children, and gives an approximation of their ages, but there is no surname, so it is very difficult to know which, in this case, Billy, or John, or Prudence. Prudence who? So very difficult to work out who might have been an exact ancestor. They're all my ancestors. I'm finding many, many names of many, many people who are my ancestors, my family. I better not drip on the records. I'm thinking, what a travesty, what an obscenity, what an injustice. I'm thinking that I'm very privileged. To at least read their names. Excuse me, I think I'm going to have to go and blow my nose.
For nearly 200 years, Europe, Africa and the Caribbean formed the infamous Triangle, whose trade in goods and human beings helped to fuel the Industrial Revolution. Millions of African slaves died in transit across the Atlantic. Those who survived faced lives of suffering and extreme brutality on the plantations. And yet after abolition, it took Moira's family just one generation to escape from slavery's oppressive legacy. What gave her great-great-grandfather an advantage over so many of Antigua's former slaves? Antigua's museum houses the family pedigrees, or trees, of the island's white plantation owners. One of the most prominent slave-owning families had the surname Christian.
Chester, and Christian. Okay, so this is the pedigree of the Christian family. This shows when they arrived in Antigua in 1699.
But this is slave owners. How might my ancestors have got the surname Christian?
Well, there are two ways that could have happened. The first being most of these slaves could have taken the names of their owners or the names of the estate that they lived on. The second reason could be through an illegitimate relationship with the child of a planter and a slave. That was fairly common. The fact that your ancestor was well educated, could read and write, I think he was related to these people directly by blood.
I see.
Plantation owners viewed their slaves as possessions. Brutal treatment, including rape, was commonplace. In the mid-1700s, Robert Christian was one of Antigua's wealthiest slave owners. He owned at least 6 sugar plantations across the island and kept several hundred slaves. The Christian family home is known to have stood to the south of the island, above an inlet still known as Christian Bay.
Take a look at this view. This, you can see the whole entire landscape laid out here as Robert Christian would have seen his estates. All these hills around here would have been covered in sugarcane. Right. And this being the most prominent hill in the area is the most likely place where Robert Christian would have lived.
Okay.
Welcome home.
And I don't know about that. Where would my ancestors, the slaves, be living?
Well, I see you as having 2 lineages. your ancestors were a combination of the planters, the white planters, and the enslaved people. So the enslaved people lived further down the hill in what's now a Christian village. The planter's illegitimate child would have lived a little closer, somewhere closer to the great house. He was most likely had an important job, and be the person of mixed race. He would not have fitted into either society very well. So he would have been in the margin of both, somewhere in this area, but closer to the great house.
I see. So the Christians must be spinning in their graves about now, like claiming them as my ancestors.
Exactly. The white planters wouldn't be too thrilled to know that today most black people can trace their ancestry through them. Ultimate irony.
Oh, the irony, yes, indeed.
I desperately wanted to find out about my past, but it was nothing like what I had expected. I thought there might be some very noisy skeletons in the cupboard, but I didn't expect to have to, if not embrace, at least acknowledge the slave owners as well as those who I thought were my true ancestors. There is a rage within me and a guilt that my family were closer to the big house. It seems the ultimate indignity that one should find hierarchies in something as disgusting as slavery. I cannot own the travesty, the crime of the slave master. I really can't. Well, I found that my family was wider than I expected. But I'm still very aware of being an onlooker, and I think it will be some time before the echoes and the shouts of slavery, of that experience, fade. I don't want to be confined or defined by slavery, but it's an excellent lesson that one cannot in any way just have a nice, easy, simple answer to such a difficult question. Who am I?